From Chicago's CAN TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Oh, hi. Welcome to Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis, just sitting here with Glenn Reedus. We're looking over the newspapers, trying to figure out if there's anything going on. But it turns out, did you know that Gary McCarthy got fired?
What a surprise.
Yeah.
Huh?
Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
We have Glenn Reedus joining us today, independent journalist and with DePriest voter Chronicles. And, we've had you on the show a bunch of times and never mentioned before that for some period of time you were executive editor of The Defender, too.
I was interim executive editor and managing editor for a couple of years at The Defender.
You have a heck of a resume. You've worked in a lot of places. And I just realized we had something in common. I didn't know this until yesterday. We both have been PIOs for governments at various times.
I was in Pontiac, Michigan. That was in the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
And it was a great time because I had been a city hall reporter in Pontiac. And I remember once I became a PIO in city government, one of the department heads said, "Well, Reed, you've been on both sides now. What's the difference?"
Yeah.
I said, "Well, when I was a reporter and I called and I didn't get a return call, I actually thought somebody made a decision that they weren't going to call me back." I said, "But since I've been here, I found out you guys don't know about those pink slips that say while you were out." I said, "Nobody takes messages."
So sometimes you just can't call back. Yeah. Well, anyway, needless to say, we have a lot of ground to cover today. And the first thing I want to ask you is obviously Gary McCarthy. Did Mayor Emanuel do the right thing? Was it the politically best thing to have fired Gary McCarthy when he did? Will he regret doing that?
I doubt he will regret that. There was such an uproar, a persistent uproar, to get rid of McCarthy because, as most of us see it, the guy at the head makes things happen. Mm-hmm. And McCarthy wasn't making things happen. Over the years, he had to backtrack on some things about the statistics of whether crime was down, it wasn't down, what kind of crimes. And anybody who watched the HBO series, The Wire, understood how you can change the stats by recalculating or reassigning specific crimes. So I don't think that he had a lot of credibility, and that should have been, and I think it was an easy call for the mayor, although there's been a lot of talk about how loyal he is to the people he brings on board.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was, in your view then, it was more than just Laquan McDonald that justified telling him to go.
I mean, I don't see a high point in his time here with the mayor.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know, I pulled off some numbers this morning. These are his own numbers, but he had been telling the media until the other day, that police-involved shootings are down 65% in the last couple of years. I don't know the exact numbers, but they were like 80 or 90, and they're down in the teens this year in 2015. Civilian complaints, they say, are down 25%, arrests are down 25%. But on the other hand, in the time that he's been here, the city's paid $26 million in payouts for complaints against police.
Yeah, but we can't put that one on McCarthy, because when the mayor came in, he said that he would prefer to settle versus going to court because of the risk of a jury or a judge awarding more than the city was willing to settle for. But I mean, when McCarthy says police misconduct, police shootings are down, it's sort of, why do we have them? Why are you shooting people? I mean, I understand it if they're shooting, they're threatening you, but we've seen so many of these where the deceased was not a threat to an officer or the officers.
Well, one of the things I really want to get into with you today is since we're both kind of techies also, is the just dramatic change that the technology has made in this police community relations field. I mean, it's just, McCarthy himself said on the way out the door that the difference in policing between now and 5 or 6 years ago is dramatic, and it's pretty much because of those phones we carry in our pockets.
Well, that's a sign, and to me, that's a sign of being an excellent leader. You change with the times. The mayor and McCarthy were talking about just a few months ago, cops being afraid to be police. That's
fetal position, I think was the term, right?
That was the mayor's term.
Yeah.
And that's a joke. If you aren't doing anything wrong, if you make the stop properly, you engage the person you stopped properly, and you find you have to arrest them, everybody on the block can have a camera on you, and you should be okay.
Does the irony strike you of what you just said, that that's what the police have been telling us for the last 100 years? If you do everything right, then you have nothing to worry about. And now you're saying the same thing to them, right?
If they do everything right, they have nothing to worry about.
If you do this right, you won't have anything to worry about. Yeah. Well, obviously the other side of the Gary McCarthy thing is the Rahm Emanuel thing. And now, I mean, I don't think that Rahm Emanuel could ever have imagined that he'd be in the middle of, this kind of, as they say, firestorm, where everybody seems to be calling for his resignation. And I thought it was dramatic yesterday to see the White House press office say, should he step down? Well, that's up to the people of Chicago to determine. I mean, this is his buddy, Rahm Emanuel, the guy he was chief of staff for, distancing himself from him. Hillary Clinton said that, yes, there should be an investigation. That's his other good friend.
They have a moral compass. Hillary knows that he was wrong, and so let there be an investigation. Let this thing come open. Regarding the White House, I think the president and his advisors have to be somewhat neutral, because since he's been in office, he hasn't been a Chicago president like so many people wanted him to be. So that message was consistent with everything that has happened with Chicago and the Obama presidency.
Well, let's look at this then. One of the reasons I really was excited about having you to come here today is that, we're both a little on the senior side. We've both been around for a while and seen a few things happen. Do you think that, I don't even know how to put this to you, do you think that it's really legit to ask for his resignation? I mean, would it help anything in any way if he were to be magnanimous about it and say, that's it, you're right, I'm a distraction, I should leave? I mean, come on, would that help the city?
No, it wouldn't.
That's kind of my feeling too.
I mean, there would be chaos.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have necessarily the council wars of the post-Harold Washington era, but who would you get? Brendan Riley for a minute running, and then the council decides.
Right. See, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's exactly what I was thinking this morning. It's like, I've lived through two of these, when Old Man Daley died and when Harold Washington died, and the city council just basically went up for grabs, and it just because all this docile little group of people, all of a sudden all the long knives come out. And I just can't even imagine what it would be like. The council would split racially, it would split economically, you're absolutely right, it would be chaos, and it would take a long time to recover from it. And what would we end up with? Would we end up with a mayor who's demonstrably better than the one we have?
Well, I seriously doubt it. And if you got a new mayor, there are so many problems to fix that this new person wasn't in on. And that's going to take 3 years in office. Right. So at best, we're running in place with the new mayor.
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of get that feeling that, okay, this is pretty much graduation day. He's finished his schooling on how Chicago works. Now maybe he can get in front of it. It's interesting to me that in his history as a COS in Washington and other places, he's always been given credit for being very good at managing a story, managing a crisis. And yet what we've seen here is, it seems to me that he's been very timid about these things. He's run away from them. He's said, let's hide the video. Let's not let anybody see it. And it seems to me, with the benefit of being a Monday morning quarterback, that there was a period there was a time when he could have said, and of course it would have been in the middle of an election cycle, but he still could have just jumped up and said, you know what, somebody just showed me a video, and it's disgraceful, it's disgusting, I'm repulsed by it, and I am going to act on this. I'm going to fire this guy, not McCarthy. I am going to fire him as the chief executive of the city. Yes, I'm going to fire this police officer. And if the police union doesn't like it, well, here's Steve Patton's phone number. So sue me. That's the kind of mayor that I would like to see. And he seems like he's that kind of guy, but he's not doing it.
I don't know if he's that kind of guy across the board with every department. Mm-hmm. And I think that this just kind of fell off of the screen for him, and his attitude is, okay, McCarthy, I hired you, deal with it, mm-hmm. fix it, I'm
Make it go away.
Yeah, I'm going on to something else.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think we saw that very early on, and maybe continuing through the 5 years of his administration, that we were very accustomed to mayors, and I think it'd include Harold Washington in this too, the Dailies and Harold Washington, who were really involved in the nitty-gritty of the operations of their departments. It's like they wanted to know, I was riding around and I was at 36th and,
right.
And I saw this and that gas station. And there's no sense that Rahm Emanuel is that kind of mayor. He just doesn't seem to be that interested in the
exactly.
nitty-gritty of running the departments. And maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. As you say, he's pretty much said, look, that's what I hired you for, to run sanitation. I want sanitation run properly.
I think too that with those other mayors, you saw them out and about more, just checking on their city. Mm-hmm. They own the city. I don't think that Rahm has that same sort of mentality about his city. It's more his empire, and mm-hmm. we're minions. Mm-hmm. But both dailies just had that touch. It wasn't mm-hmm. necessarily a common touch, but it wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't off-putting. Yeah. And Mayor Washington had more than the common touch. Mm-hmm. And Rahm just doesn't get it. He's behaving as though he's still in Congress and distanced from the area he serves, and can pop in and out when it's convenient.
Yeah. So I guess I have to ask you if there are these couple of questions that are in the air that everybody's been debating all week long, but do you believe that he would have won re-election if that video had been released before the election?
That's a tough call, because I think that would be really dependent upon the black community and the people who see themselves and who are activists mm-hmm. as rallying to support Laquan McDonald mm-hmm. or support the mayor. I think that you would have seen, in addition to this mea culpa from the mayor, you would have also seen an intense PR campaign, mm-hmm.
More
so than the traditional vote for me because I'm wearing a sweater and I'm going to listen to you.
Yeah. Well, see, that's kind of, this question's been batted around all week, and I thought that it would be really interesting to ask you about this, because I disqualify myself from having any ability to have an opinion on this, other than just my opinion as this guy who's lived in Chicago all this time. And it is my perception that 20, 25, even 30 years ago, the African American community in this city was. I'm walking into this, and you're going to have to rescue me from this. But it appears to me that it was better organized in a way, that it was more politically savvy than it is today. I don't know if it's because there's been a generation shift, or maybe because so many of the real leaders have kind of left Chicago, or whatever it is. But my immediate reaction to that question was, I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure that he wouldn't have won, because maybe a lot of black Chicago would have just continued to vote for him anyway.
I think too, you have to look at what kind of fodder that would have been for Mr. Garcia. Mm-hmm. And it's a multi-dimensional aspect, not just Rahm and the black voters, but this outside force of Mr. Garcia being able to meld that into a really powerful message. And I think he could have done that.
You think Garcia could have done that?
Yeah, I think he could have.
Because I think we talked about this before. I mean, this is one of these dynamics that it's very hard to put your finger on, but there didn't, at least as far as the election was going, there did not appear to be a lot of general black support for Garcia. And I'm not sure that this video coming out would have sent people over to Garcia. Would it have done that, or would maybe people would have just sat out the election? What do you think would have happened there?
I don't think they would have sat out. I think that emotion would have taken over, and you've got a black kid being gunned down by a white officer caught on tape, and Mr. Garcia stands up and says that there's no way in the world that would happen. I can't control every cop, but there is no way in the world that would happen under my administration. And that's the plan that Rahm always said that Mr. Garcia did not have. That would, in my opinion, that would have been enough to dissuade some of Rahm's voters. But there were a lot of people out there getting paid to be pro-Rahm too. And he made promises that obviously haven't been kept.
And he had access to more money, so that would have been, he had way more money than Garcia could ever have hoped to have gotten. So what do you think about Rahm and the video? Do you think he's lying? Do you think he watched the video?
Can you say the mayor's lying in Chicago?
Okay.
Let me put it like this.
Let's find another way to put it. Do you think maybe the mayor didn't remember that he had actually seen it?
No.
No.
There was a news conference the day that they announced it, and when it was going to be released, and one of the television reporters asked him, have you seen it? And instead of saying yes or no, he said, I'm going to look at it now. And that sort of said, yeah, but it's none of your business.
Yeah. But he has, am I misremembering this? He has said, has he not, that he didn't see it?
He said he didn't.
Yeah, he didn't watch it until, and that was because it was an ongoing investigation.
Which makes no sense to me. If you've got the incident recorded, how can any of the facts or circumstances change because of an investigation?
I mean, I again, wandering off into the jungle that I don't know anything about, but I mean, when you're the chief executive officer of any organization, company, or city, or whatever it is, you have extraordinary powers, and one of them is that you ought to be able to pretty much watch anything you want.
When you want to watch it.
When you want to watch it. And like I said, and if you don't like it, so sue me. I'm going to watch it.
Right.
But I think it ties to what you were saying earlier, Glenn, that there's something about Rahm Emanuel that when it gets right down to it, his approach is to say, that's not my thing. It's not my department. I got people to do that.
Right.
I'm going to stay, that somehow if I stay above it, it's going to be better for me and it'll make me a better leader or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like the gangsters who hire somebody to tell someone else to make the hit.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be no connection.
Right. Well, I would take it a step further and say it's like hiring a a company to come in and privatize some operation that you have in the city and then have them hire another company to come in and fire the people and bring in the $3 an hour people that you're going to have. It's like you have this double layer of insulation from
Right.
where the real action is going on.
And then
I
you
didn't do that. I just
didn't
tried
know
to
they
save
were going
some-
to do
Yeah,
that, right.
I can't believe they did that. Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about Anita Alvarez because obviously there's a huge bunch of stuff that needs to be talked about there. But Natasha Korecki has really been making a big name for herself in the last 48 hours. Not only that she had the first interview with the mayor yesterday, but yesterday morning she dropped what I thought was a real bombshell when she talked to Anita Alvarez on, I guess it was Tuesday.
Yes.
And Anita Alvarez told her, and this is a quote that it's quoting Natasha Korecki. Anita Alvarez told her that her office did not compel the city to wage a legal battle to keep the video from becoming public. In other words, the mayor has been saying he couldn't release the video because it was part of an ongoing thing. And so he attempted to throw Anita Alvarez under this bus, which is now like 4 feet up in the air with all the bodies under it.
You can walk under the bus.
You can just walk right under it because everybody's under this bus. So he attempted to load it off onto Anita Alvarez by saying it was her fault that he couldn't show the video. And then she returned the favor to Natasha Korecki and said, I never told him that.
I think that she's desperate. Anybody in her situation would be desperate. And there might have, if there wasn't so much heat around this entire thing, she might have taken the hit for the mayor, but now she's fighting for her job. And she's not gonna let this guy get in the way of that.
So, I mean, this is, to me, this is a really significant question. If, as Anita Alvarez said, this had become a FOIA-able event.
Right.
And so she didn't feel that it was appropriate to stand in the way of reporters getting access to it.
And she wasn't included in the FOIA.
Right.
So why should she be involved in that part at all? I mean, it goes back to the mayor and the city's law department. That's where it should have stayed, but the mayor chose to point down the street at the state's attorney, and it was inappropriate.
Yeah. But I mean, while we're there, we might as well just run down that little cul-de-sac for a minute or two. I mean, I have to say that I think the notion that she should resign with a few months left to go in office is kind of goofy to me. It's like she's going to be facing the voters in the next couple of months.
Right.
So, let the voters, I would say let the voters have their say on that. But does she have any hope of getting reelected at this point?
Not that I can see.
Yeah.
Not only does she have this attached to her, she has a very formidable, in my opinion, very formidable candidate in Kim Foxx, who used to work for her. But I think that Kim is the sort of breath of fresh air that's needed in that office. And Alvarez came in as a reformer, and we haven't seen that.
Yeah. Forgive me for not knowing this, but would Kim Foxx be the first black state's attorney? I think she would, wouldn't
Yes, she would.
Yeah.
Andrea Zopp was the first deputy or whatever they call it. But Kim would be the first African-American state's attorney.
And this is a time when there's a great significance to that, so that works for her in her favor also, I would imagine.
Definitely.
Yeah. The other thing before we get off on all this settlement stuff is the idea that the city of Chicago paid $5 million to the mother of Laquan McDonald, and it's not even clear whether that's what she and her attorneys were even asking for. But on top of everything else, she's not
his biological mom.
She's not his biological mom?
No.
But she's also not his, what's the word I'm looking for? His guardian, right?
He was considered a ward of the state.
Was a ward of the state.
Right.
So that makes things even more bizarre.
Well, I read something that said that her attorneys went to the city with this offer. So that, $5 million and what's 1.5 million for them?
For the attorneys, you mean? Yeah. So it was worth taking the case.
You got it.
Yeah. But it just adds another layer of bizarreness to this whole thing. There were Mary Mitchell had done an excellent column on his
problems.
But the fact that he was really trying to make some progress.
Right. There was I think she was from the DCFS, and she said that Laquan had a summer job when he went to school. He was going to school every day, and then when that summer job was over, he found another job, and this kid was really on the right path. And then this happens, and he had a history of some mental problems, but not violence.
Yeah. We need to talk about the Mike Forshey over at Aldertrack broke this story of the meeting that the mayor had with his friends, the African American ministers, who he called in to ask for their advice and to give him some advice on how to handle the situation. And then he told him.
I don't know that he
you
called.
Tell the story.
I don't know if he called them in to ask for advice, but to give them what their advice ought to be.
Right.
But yeah, I read Mike's story and talked to him about it. And I think he had 4 people to collaborate the events, and that the mayor pretty much said, this was right before the Black Friday protests, this thing had better stay peaceful. If it isn't peaceful, I'm going to blame you guys. And when I blame you, that means don't come to me for jobs, don't come for anything in your community. And one of the people who was attending, who wasn't a minister, told him that was pretty racist. Too. And so, according to Mike's story, the mayor backtracked and said, well, I mean, if there are problems and there's violence, resources that we would have had otherwise, we would have to direct those to cleaning up the areas of violence. And then another minister said, wait a minute, you've got the money already, so how are you redirecting anything? And that was also presuming that this was going to be horrific, widespread violence that took millions to clean up.
Yeah, I mean, on so many levels, it's so incredibly inappropriate that it just defies the imagination. But we have run out of time for our TV show here right now, and Glenn, I'm just really very happy that you were able to join us. But we're not going to stop. Don't say that. We're going to stick around. We're doing something a little different today. We're going to continue on YouTube. So if you go to this address, the one we usually tell you to watch, you can watch the show anytime you want. But if you go here now, you'll be able to see us continuing on with this conversation. And we're going to talk about Black Friday, the march up Michigan Avenue. We'll talk about the DOJ investigation, the Burger King tapes. Lots of really good stuff on Overtime here today. So do that, and we'll be back again next week. If you're leaving us now, we'll see you with another show. But go to this address and watch us on YouTube if you're not already watching us on YouTube. Thanks to CAN TV, I'm Ken Davis. We'll see you with another program, or this one. It's so confusing, isn't it? Bye for now. And hi for now. Hi to everybody still watching us on YouTube. We were talking before the break, and I'm sure everybody who's watching now was already watching before, so we were talking about the minister meeting, and it just really gets to me about this relationship that's existed for so long between a large group of African American ministers and the mayors of Chicago, and the fact that they have been, from my perception, so easily pliable at the mayor's hands. When the mayor wants something, he knows who to call. And I'm not just talking about Emanuel, the previous mayor.
Well, it's not just Chicago either. I've lived in, 5 other states, and it runs the gamut. And I think it goes way back to in the early part of the 20th century, when there weren't a lot of education in the black community just wasn't widespread. There were people who literally could not read, and the preacher was the guy who was considered the most educated because he could read and he knew the Bible, and that's a staple of our community. And so he was revered in the black community, and that just continued and continued. And there were a few preachers like Adam Clayton Powell, who moved into politics and was terribly, terribly popular. And his successor, Dr. Calvin O. Butts, who at Abyssinian, who's the pastor at Abyssinian. But his career was more in the educational area. I think he was on the New York State. He ran one of the New York State universities for a while. But that reverence for ministers just continued over the decades, and some wise politician was able to make that connection that all of those people in those pews do what this guy says.
Yeah.
And it's just continued. What seems to get overlooked, I would say in the last 10 years or so, is that the IRS changed the laws, and that now you can't endorse a candidate from the pulpit because that's politicking, and 501c3s or C4s, whatever churches are, to maintain their nonprofit status. Then all of a sudden, either politicians weren't welcome, or as my old pastor used to do in Pontiac, Michigan, and it was the largest or the second largest church in Pontiac, the politicians could come in and he'd ask them to stand, and he'd tell people, when you go to vote on Tuesday, just remember who was here with you. But they didn't get to speak. He didn't say, this is who you should vote for. But I think that as a community has become better educated, and we have access to everything, that the reliance on ministers to provide political guidance has diminished tremendously. Unfortunately, I don't think that a lot of those ministers have gotten that message.
And apparently a lot of the political leaders don't understand it either.
Exactly.
So that's why they still do these, it's a terrible phrase to use, but they kind of use these minister booty calls. I mean, it's sort of like, you see this is how you know that a mayor is in trouble, when he calls the African American ministers in, right?
Well, the other thing that I learned some years ago is that there aren't a lot of denominations that allow, or used to allow, politicians to go to the pulpit. And say that. So that's why it's been so predominant in the African American community.
So I really was hoping that we would get to talk today about Black Friday, the March on Michigan Avenue, because I got to tell you, again, drawing on my age, it's one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen in Chicago.
I'd agree.
I mean, and I've seen a lot of weird things, but I've never seen anything quite like
weird,
that.
But...
Well, I mean, okay, interesting things. It was remarkable on so many levels. It was remarkable on the fact that the merchants somehow or other figured out that they could not get themselves in front of this. They had to just remain quiet and let this happen, even though it may have cost them $10 million. Maybe they figured this was better than having all their stores looted or whatever they expected might happen. But you also had this interesting generational shift happening here, where you had a lot of young people organizing this thing. And it must be said, and I think it's really interesting, and this goes back to the McCarthy thing, the way the police handled the situation. This was not, Mayor Daley One's police department. This was not,
no,
get out
no.
the nightsticks and crack heads down on Wacker Drive so that they don't get across the bridge. I'm astounded by everything that I saw there.
It was beautiful. When you think about all of those elements at play, first of all, you had the mayor, now we can say, lying about the perceived violence. All of the talk and the social media about organizing didn't speak about violence, unless you want to say shut them down somehow equates with violence. Mm-hmm. So the mayor sent out this message that there's going to be trouble. There's going to be big trouble, and I took that to mean that they were going to have cops there to kind of selectively grab some people they hadn't they hadn't had access to. Mm-hmm. But as you said, there wasn't any violence. And I've seen the cops maybe a month ago when they were marching or traveling with some students who were demonstrating down at the CPS headquarters. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They didn't really engage or interact with them. They just kind of created a barrier between the people and the marchers, and they just went along with them. And that is a McCarthy philosophy. Mm-hmm. Of not trying to force people into corners or that sort of thing. But and
also just not wearing riot gear, not having face shields, and
oh no,
I mean
bicycles and
right.
their jackets and helmet,
right.
Nothing. Yeah. So I think that if you don't create that kind of intimidating presence, you won't get a violent reaction. Mm-hmm. But I think the most impressive thing was that this was, as you mentioned, young people, the millennials, organizing this, at least 7, 8 different groups, saying this is what we're going to do, this is when we're going to do it, this is how we're going to do it. And there's been a lot of talk the last several years about how some of the older black politicians should step aside because these youngsters want these jobs. They want to be congressmen. Not to say that they could do it, it's just what they want. Mm-hmm. It's like the 70-year-old who wants to drive under Dan Ryan, in my opinion. But this time they didn't ask them to step aside. They said, this is what we're going to do. And I think that was historic in that they took the lead.
Just do it.
Right. Yeah. When you look at Paul Robeson and Marcus Garvey, they had the benefit of a few black folks with radios and a couple of black newspapers. Then television made Dr. King a national voice, a national leader. And at that time, though, you had SNCC, which took a lane in the traditional civil rights movement. The Panthers took another lane, but they all traveled parallel. This time, the millennials got in front of it, which has never happened. And they did an excellent job of getting the message across.
And I can't help but interrupt you for just a second, because you were making this very interesting step ladder thing of initially you had maybe print newspapers and maybe you had radio, then Dr. King had TV, and these guys have the internet.
The social media is huge for them.
These guys have social media, and social media worked for them in this case, I assume.
Oh, without question. If there's any drawback to social media, it lets everybody proclaim they're a leader. Or the voices aren't always even. It's almost who can shout the loudest.
So there were reports of an incident where a group of people, it was reported, took away the microphone from Jesse Jackson. Is that what happened?
Well, I can only say what I read because I wasn't there, but it was not, I think his system, his loudspeaker system was unplugged. He had the microphone, but there was some contention about where he wanted to stop and where the protest was going to continue. And from talking to somebody who talks to him every day, there was some criticism, there was some criticism that he made his speech and he left. Well, he had some place to go. I mean, it wasn't that he had committed the day to protesting.
So he wasn't forced out, he wasn't kicked out or anything like that.
No, nothing like that.
But you nevertheless can't help but get this notion that there's a generational shift of some kind that's going on here. I mean, the older guys they're just not having, they don't have the influence that they had.
Oh, I think that there is a huge generational shift, and I think that the younger generation is sorting out how they're going to proceed. Of course, the protest work and what I'm hearing is that there are going to be other protests, but going beyond that is that's going to be the key.
But I also picked up on something else, and I don't think I've seen anybody else talk about this, but I did hear, I heard audio of someone saying after Reverend Jackson, we didn't come here to pray. We came here to shut this place down. And I'm curious about whether there is, in addition to a generational shift, there's also a religious versus more secular shift going on. These younger people are not particularly impressed by reverends, I'm guessing, by and large.
No, I don't think so. And when you look at there are only a handful of ministers that I can think of who, when you see them addressing an issue, they have young people with them regularly. I think Ira Ackery on the west side is one, and Marshall Hatch is another.
I thought it was really interesting that Father Pfleger on Sunday, he was congratulating the young people for taking the lead, and then kind of admonished them and said, but don't you forget that there's a higher power, and that if you don't have God on your side, then you don't have it was really kind of an interesting moment, I thought, where even he probably realizes that there's this other shift going on here, this more secular shift.
Well, Pfleger is one of those who, for a long time, has embraced young people, with the basketball leagues and bringing in people like Joachim Noah to interact with the kids. So, but at his core, he's a priest. And I think so. He has to send that message that there is a higher power, and you don't make it happen by yourself. Bring in some prayer, and it'll get. In the history of 5 years of doing this show, I've never been able to do this before, but I'm saying, this just handed me, I feel like Walter Cronkite sitting here on the moonshot or something. They have landed, the Eagle has landed. We just got this dispatch here from the Chicago Tribune that Mayor Emanuel has backpedaled on his opposition to a possible U.S. Justice Department review of the city's police tactics, issuing a statement saying he's now open to such an investigation. So you get to react first. What choice did he have? I mean, he's a mayor. This is the federal government. And it's not, old man Daley and JFK. Making a president. There was nobody siding with Rahm on this. I mean, Hillary Clinton, I think Valerie Jarrett spoke out for this. I mean, his wife maybe was on his side about that.
Well, I think it might change the dynamic a little bit in that the Justice Department may have been, I just don't have any idea, but maybe Loretta Lynch would have been a little bit reluctant if she knew that the mayor himself was directly opposed to it. But if he's not opposed to it, now there's really nobody standing in the way of them conducting an investigation. So the pressure increases on Loretta Lynch, doesn't it, to do such an investigation?
Oh, most definitely, and do it expeditiously too, because even with the evidence, people want answers, and they want them yesterday as to, because the discussion has shifted somewhat to the overall corruption within the department, and not just with, what's his name, Van Dyke, Officer Van Dyke. So I think that Mrs. Lynch has to send her people in and send the top people, and who can do it.
That's going to be interesting to watch, huh?
Yeah, and who can do it as quickly as possible and get answers.
This is something we're going to be talking about for a long time, I'm sure. Just one more quick thing, going back for a moment to the Michigan Avenue situation. I was struck by the fact that the Greater North Michigan Avenue Association and all the associations of merchants and everything just stayed stone quiet during all of this. Now, they may have been complaining to the mayor about his police not clearing their doors or something, but they didn't make any public statement about it. And I'm guessing that part of the reason is because they kind of understand that, they'll make it up in the next few days. I mean, that $10 million, they'll make it up, before.
Without question. Yeah, I mean, it's called Black Friday because of profits, not because of anything else. And so they have, Black Tuesday or Black Wednesday.
Right,
I mean, they're going to hit their mark.
And there's one of the great media conspiracies. Here's my Fox News thing. You want to talk about a media conspiracy? The biggest one of them all is the great lie about Black Friday, because it hasn't been for 20 years the most busy shopping day of the year, but we still see all these stories about, people running into Walmart at 4 o'clock in the morning, and, it's just not happening anymore. So probably these guys even understand that, especially the high-end retailers on Michigan Avenue. They're probably selling much more online than they are in their stores anyway.
Most definitely.
So, now my favorite part of the conversation, the Burger King tapes. I am obsessing on the Burger King tapes. There was a story that broke online on Tuesday night, I think, with Frank Main and Fran Spielman, said that they had a single source within the FBI who told them that the Burger King tapes had not been tampered with. I saw that. I immediately reposted it on Facebook and said, wow, this is big. This is a major development in the story. And then realized the next morning the Sun-Times put it on page 5. Nobody else picked it up. And I can't figure it out. To me, it's a great media story. Why did that story not have legs? Is there, I mean, we of course don't know whether it's true or not. But if it was true that the FBI came in, took all the cameras out, sent it out for forensic investigation, and said, no, we can't find any evidence that any police officers messed with this, isn't that a big deal?
It seems like it would be, but maybe what happened is that early on, and I don't remember which television station said that it wouldn't have shown what happened immediately prior to Laquan McDonald being shot.
Right.
That's the only reason I can think of that it wasn't a big deal. But having been in newspapers all these years, you're taught not to rely on single source stories.
Absolutely.
And I think that yesterday there was a story with somebody who was from CPD who knew that those cameras malfunctioned a lot, or there were technical difficulties, as well as somebody from the feds. But the part that struck me as odd is that the FBI would swoop in so quickly, get this microwave analysis, and get results out to anyone, within a matter of 6-8 hours.
Yeah, it is. There's so many things about it that are interesting. And of course, Channel 5 has something that they got from a single source.
Television, you expect that.
Yeah. Or slap around the old newspaper guys slapping around the TV people. Yeah. No, but they had screen grabs of video from a separate surveillance system that was running while these two people.
The two cops were in there looking at the tapes, and they said they spent 2 hours in there looking at the tapes. I've never in my life seen a surveillance tape, so I don't know if it's like the microfilm, you got to stop and re-roll.
Yeah. Or run it in real time or whatever it is. But I mean, look, we're all just kind of having fun with this at this point, but it seems to me that one of the things that the single source told the Sun-Times is that system was a mess because there were all kinds of holes all over the last few weeks before. It was just starting and stopping. So, if you knew what you were doing and you erased the 80 minutes, you would also go back and erase a whole bunch of other stuff just to make it look like that, right? Now, that's just crazy speculation here. There's nothing to back that up. I'm just talking off the top of my head as a guy who loves to play around with video, but it's just very interesting. And of course, there was also the thing about there was another single source thing that these police officers may have called in a technical expert, an IT expert, to look at the tape before anybody knew they were in there. So, hey.
Speculation again.
The point to all of this, Glenn, is that forget all the speculation. There needs to be a law. There needs to be some kind of federal law that says that surveillance video of an event is off limits to the police officers who were involved in that event, whatever it is. Because we see it over and over again. We've seen it so many times in Chicago. Look at I know you were talking about...
Abadi?
Yeah, Officer Abadi, right?
Yeah, beating up the waitress, and that, if I recall, that video wasn't made available immediately. Mm-hmm. And there was some problems with when it was made and how much of it was that we didn't see, even though we saw plenty there.
Yeah. Well, anyway, to me that is just a really interesting issue in and of itself about how we deal with surveillance video and who gets to view it, and what is the public's involvement in being able to see that video unedited, because there's a huge issue about this stuff being edited, and it's very hard to trust that it's not edited.
The problem, as I see it though, is you're going to tie things up in court. With that, lawyers for one side or the other, they'll tie it up in court, and then we really don't know what's happening.
Very good point.
What do you call it? The chain of handling.
Okay, so I've got you here for. We're just running so far over time, but as long as I got you, I just want to, on a completely different subject, I want to ask you about Glenn Evans. Glenn Evans is the commander who is also facing, I believe next week his trial begins, right?
Well, it's scheduled, but how many times has it been continued?
Right.
At least 5.
He has something like 50 charges against him.
Well, not in court.
No, I'm saying
50 complaints against.
Right, complaints is the word.
Against him as a cop and doing his job. He's going to court. I think it's on 3 counts, and he's accused of seeing a guy at a bus stop or something, and according to this man, Commander Evans was just staring at him to the point, and Evans was in the car, and to the point that he got nervous and he ran. When he ran, Evans chased him. Evans caught him, and according to Evans, this guy had a gun. The man says he never had a gun. He said Evans put his service revolver in his mouth, put a taser against his genitals, and kept shouting, "Where's the gun? You got to tell me where's the gun? And so he sued. And this one, this is the suit that stuck. Evans he's been controversial. I did a story about this and black officers in the black community.
It was in the Reporter.
It was in the Chicago Reporter.
Look that up. It's a
couple,
Reporter.
maybe a month ago. Mm-hmm. But there's one camp that says even though Evans he runs roughshod over people in the black community, it's okay because people want a safe community and they want the bad guys to know somebody's going to come down on them. Mm-hmm. But there's another camp that says, whoa, the one you think is the bad guy is my grandson, and maybe he's hanging out with some people. He's not a bad kid, and even the ones he's hanging out with have civil rights. We don't want them violated. Then you have the Chicago Police Department, who has received all of these complaints against Evans, but they ignore them pretty much because he keeps getting promoted. Yeah. And there
McCarthy promoted him
a couple of times, and he transferred him from one very violent district to another. And when he left the first one, the people were disappointed some people were disappointed that he was gone. And I don't remember if it was Buzz Palmer who started the African American Policemen's League or Pat Hill, who was the first female executive director, but one of them said, Glenn couldn't do this in Bridgeport.
If they transferred him to Bridgeport.
If he got, it was Pat Hill, because I remember her quote was, if through some miracle Glenn was transferred to Bridgeport, he couldn't do this. She said the aldermen wouldn't put up with it, and the residents wouldn't put up with it. And in the black community, it's, hey, don't shoot us. Anything short of that, okay.
And of course, it's not over yet because we still have Cedric Chapman. His tape is out there somewhere, and we might be seeing a whole new thing with that.
Most definitely. But I don't know with the federal investigation going on, if that will push it out or somehow make it disappear.
Yeah. Well, we should say that's another dash cam tape that is still sitting out there. The mother wants it released.
The mother is really, and this happened before Laquan McDonald was murdered.
Wow, so it just keeps going on. And finally, Glenn, are you going to go see Chirac? Are you going to go to the theater and see Chirac or not? Or have you already seen it? Maybe you've seen a press version.
I haven't seen it. I will see it. I'm deciding, but I'm not certain I'm going to go through the trouble of going to the theater to see it.
You're just like a digital guy. You'll just sit at home and watch it.
Yeah. The comfort of the home.
All right. Well, when you've decided what you think of it, I want to hear what you think.
Most definitely.
It's just like there's so much controversy about it. Well, anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with us for the last hour. You've been watching Chicago Newsroom, and we'll be back next week with another show at our regular half-hour type show. I want you to know that you can watch anytime you want right here at this address, and you can see any of our shows. There are all hundreds and hundreds of them out there on the internet. So we'll see you next week with another show. Thanks very much, and thanks to CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis. So long for now.